be bringing you the second episode of 4 impactful teaching strategies. The last episode talked about vocabulary development ideas, and let's see what we are going to do with you today. Today we are focusing on how do you deal with misconceptions. This is something that no B.Ed course might teach you. I hope they have included that into their curriculum, but we find this a very powerful idea. And what does that really mean? So what are misconceptions? What is a misconception? You have a different view of looking at something which is usually incorrect, simply because it is based on faulty thinking, faulty understanding, and mind you, also faulty teaching. And which is why we're talking about it in teaching strategies. And these misconceptions can last you for a life, and you can continue to remain erroneous in your knowledge. You might have illogical and misinformed ideas. And these are what is termed as misconceptions. Of course, I'm going to show you examples of what I am saying on my slide. The good news is that these are not unusual. Okay, they are a normal part of our learning process. Sometimes we just naturally form ideas from what we experience. Sometimes we're not paying attention to what's going on in the class. Sometimes our teachers have not really clarified ideas and concepts the way they should have. And that's why we stay with these for life. Maybe many of us think today have a lot of misconceptions even at this age and stage of our lives. We never bothered to correct them. So let's look at what are these misconceptions. For example, the simplest one that I can think of is about evolution. I'm not a biology teacher, but we all directly say, oh, we came from the chimps. That's the way the Homo sapiens are looked. We look at ourselves and we're directly from the chimps. We forget that there has been a process of evolution. And whatever we are today, we have that genes, those cells of all the organisms that we have to map in history where evolution is concerned. That was just to get you started of how we love to live with some pet theory or idea. We're not willing to give it up, and that could be a misconception. Not always, but sometimes. So we need to become alert to them. And when? Right at the beginning. The minute we state our objectives, if you have looked at our series on lesson planning, which is there on YouTube, 4 episodes, you will find that I also deal with misconceptions ideas there. The minute you set the objectives, write down what could be the possible misconceptions. The first one that I have is this middle school curriculum of teaching them about Jalachakra. Jalachakra क्या है? Water cycle क्या है? पानी कहाँ से आता है, जाता है, चक्र में घूमता है, कुछ नहीं दिखता है. Okay, and therefore students could have a lot of misconceptions. For example, they might not have understood a few things about the water cycle which they also see in daily life. Watch out for this. They might think that everyday drying of clothes that you pull out of the washing machine and dry, or even without the washing machine, बच्चों को पूछो कि पानी कहाँ गया, and they might say सूख गया. They don't look at that as evaporation. They don't connect these two ideas. They might be drinking a lot of cold drinks right now. It's hot summer here in India. But they don't think of the droplets on those bottles as condensation, because we never speak to them as this is condensation. We don't say anything. We don't say that this is condensation on the windshield of the car. We just say kapda leke poch do. So they don't connect what they are learning in school with what they are seeing and perceiving in real life, and they can therefore stay with these misconceptions. They might think that the sun is always required for evaporation. This is a problem of the textbook. The textbook will always have a picture of the ocean and the picture of a sun right there, and only then can water cycle and evaporation happen. Whereas water and all other liquids are evaporating even inside the room. So they can stay with these misconceptions, and we need to watch out for them and do something about them right in our lesson plans. We got to put them there and do something. Let's look at one more example. Why just the water cycle? What about history? And looking at the images, you know what I'm going to be talking about. Of course, it's the Indus Valley civilization. Whether you're a history teacher or not, you know what this was all about. You know that famous priest, वो priest है या कौन है या साधु है या देवता है, हमने आज तक तर्क नहीं लगा पाए. So we don't know who that is. We don't know a lot about Indus Valley. We're still trying to figure out. And this culture and many such culture in history and in otherwise across the world, these misconceptions come because of some of the theory we know, some of the cultural biases we have, in today's world, and whatever was the biases of those people who excavated this civilization, really. Okay. Watch out for thinking that may be erroneous in this way. Students may think it suddenly appeared. आप भी ऐसे ही सोचते होंगे शायद, पता नहीं कहाँ से आया. We don't know that the invasions of the so-called Aryans have probably, destroyed the Indus cities. That's what they think. ये गलत बात है. They might think that Indus Valley was in the current boundaries of India, the political boundaries of India, which is not true. We know that it's also spanning up to Pakistan, Afghanistan, and so many spaces there. They might believe, and बच्चे कहते हैं ऐसा, that maybe their language at that time was also जो हम आज हिंदी बात करते हैं. So these would be some of the misconceptions that they have. Later I'll talk about what do we do about this, of course. Let me take something from geometry, mathematics. Okay. The biggest misconception is about the square. Actually, let's go back to square one. They are taught faulty facts. Take the square. It is one of the first 2D shapes that we are taught in school and we teach children. And why is there so much of confusion? How do we really know what is the confusion that the children have? Here is a fact. A square isn't really a square. You know that, right? Come on, you don't have to be a maths teacher. But the square misconception is learners are always told rectangles are different and squares are different separately. They never say the square is a part of that rectangle, and that's a misconception. They should be knowing that the square is a more specific classification of a rectangle, just like the rectangle is a specific classification of a parallelogram, and the parallelogram itself is a specific classification of a quadrilateral. But we do not say that. Okay? So one of the ideas, I found this an excellent thing that a teacher did, which I was reading a lot of stuff on what people are doing in clarifying misconceptions. And one of the math teachers, a cohort of mathematics teachers say that we need to be doing mathematics talk in the class. It's very, very vital to make sure that the children are thinking mathematically. And by the way, this is a part of the national education policy. If you've looked at it carefully, they say mathematical thinking. Okay? And what is mathematical thinking? Kabhi socha hai? It's not just problem solving and some broad umbrella term of design thinking. Mathematical thinking could be just simple math statements that they think of. Unko bolo true hai ya false hai ya depends bolna chahte hain aap. A rectangle has 4 lines of symmetry, true or false? Put into the chat box. A square is half the size of rectangle. Really? Okay. An oblong is another name for a rectangle, or a rectangle has 4 congruent sides. Every square is a rectangle and every rectangle is a square. Sahi hai ya galat? Aap batao. How much is your mathematical thinking? And maybe I put this slide because आपके अपने, हमारे अपने, मेरे अपने बहुत से misconceptions आज भी हो सकते हैं. The diagonals of a rectangle cross at right sides. We have so many misconceptions. A parallelogram is a pushed over rectangle. Okay, nice ways of discussing stuff in the class so that they will not go out of your class, of your school with a whole lot of misconceptions. Many of us today must be thinking plants are always breathing in carbon dioxide and breathing out oxygen. And we are breathing in oxygen and breathing out carbon dioxide. इसी तरह से संतुलन बना रहता है. गलत बात. Okay? Misconception. Because the teacher never talked to us about respiration, which is going on probably on the other side. Plants take in carbon dioxide only when they are in the process of photosynthesis. Okay, anyway, let's conclude this session. So what do we do? One common approach to instruction involves metacognition. Encourage students to think about their thinking. This is what is said in the National Education Policy. What is the point of saying I know NEP and not really having really seen ki class mein kya karna hai? What is it that I need to do in my class? So when I say I need to make them self-regulated learners, I need to develop metacognition. That way they will be thinking about why are they thinking like this. In part, this approach means when you start thinking about your thinking, you should also verbalize. Bol ke dikhao, Why are you saying this? How are you thinking like this? Make your thinking aloud. Let the teacher hear it. Let me hear it. The teacher also makes her own thinking aloud. And then you will be able to identify their misconceptions. Okay? So metacognition is important. Teachers need to know students' initial as well as developmental ideas and concepts. And students need to have their own ideas brought to the conscious level, and if there are misconceptions here, discard them. Some graphic organizers lend themselves very well to clarifying misconceptions, like the Venn diagram. When two ideas are very, very close to each other, compare and contrast similarities and differences, clarify misconceptions. Put it into your lesson plan. नहीं तो कुछ नहीं होना है. Okay? Do something about this. My recommendation is the teachers must make list of possible misconceptions in their own subject and share it with everyone else. The school must make a whole glossary of possible misconceptions. You will help a whole generation learn well. Like and subscribe to our channel if you are finding good stuff.